This webinar to be hosted by the Ministry of the Environmental Justice, as well as the Japan Conference for 2030 Global Biodiversity Framework, and co-hosted by the Secretariat of the Convention on Biodiversity. And this webinar is titled Japan's Contribution to the Post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. In today's program, following the opening remarks, we will have two sessions. And the second session is a panel discussion. And I'm going to be your master of ceremony. My name is Doke from the Nature Conservation Society of Japan. So first of all, I would like to we would like to have the video message.
Ohayo gozaimasu. Good morning. It is my pleasure to make the opening remarks at this event reflecting on the achievements of the UN Decade on Biodiversity. I would like to express my sincere appreciation to the Ministry of Environment Japan and the Japan Conference of the 2030 Global Biodiversity Framework for taking a leadership role in organizing this important event at such a critical time. In 2010, the UN General Assembly declared 2011 to 2020 the UN Decade on Biodiversity, with a view to contributing to the implementation of the Strategic Plan for Biodiversity 2011 to 2020, as well as following the UN Decade for Biodiversity decision adopted at the Conference of the Parties 10 in Aichi, Nagoya. The decision on the UN Decade on Biodiversity was initially proposed by the government of Japan, based on the suggestion by the Japanese civil society organizations. As you may recall, 2010 was not only the year of Japan's COP presidents, where the ambitious strategic plan on biodiversity and its Aichi biodiversity targets were adopted, but the year that the UN General Assembly also declared the International Year of Biodiversity. The UN General Assembly resolution for the International Year of Biodiversity invited UN member states to establish national committees to celebrate the International Year. Japan was among the first few countries that established a dedicated national committee for International Year on Biodiversity. Furthermore, in December 2010, Japan hosted the year's global closing event in the beautiful city of Kanazawa in Ishikawa, Japan, which also bridged the momentum to the International Year of Forests. The International Year on Biodiversity National Committee evolved into the UN Decade on Biodiversity National Committee to celebrate the decade and contribute to the Aichi biodiversity targets. Both national committees have been chaired by the president of Catering, Japan's leading economic federation, indicating Japan's intuition in anticipating the post-2020 discussions and the need to advance mainstreaming efforts for the private sector. Japan also hosted a global launching event for the UN Decade for Biodiversity in 2011 with the local governments and UN University in Kanazawa. Since then, the CBD Secretariat and the government of Japan have collaborated to promote the UN Decade, including by organizing UN Decade on Biodiversity Days events at the SEPA Fair held at CBD conferences, which encourage actors worldwide to contribute to the strategic plan for biodiversity. Globally, the decade spurred action in support of the 2050 vision. Parties have committed to establishing updated national biodiversity strategies and action plans, which have been key instruments in fulfilling the commitments set out in the strategic plan for biodiversity. Over 1/3 of the parties to the convention have already made these whole of government strategies as a result of the work of the decade. But in addition to strategies, governments and others took actions in support of implementation. The Cancun commitments and coalitions for enhanced implementation, through which parties and other governments were invited to announce commitments or actions in support of biodiversity. 66 countries and 130 UN Decade for Biodiversity partners, biodiversity-related conventions, and the Aichi Biodiversity Targets Task Force have made their commitments. The UN system was fully engaged during the decade. Through the coordination of the UN Secretary General and other UN system actors, the principles of the UN Decade on Biodiversity were incorporated into the work of the organization. Biodiversity and the Aichi Biodiversity Targets were fully mainstreamed into the Sustainable Development Goals, and not only in the targets related to life on land or below water, but also all other goals. The UN Environment Programme made biodiversity an important theme for the celebrations of the World Environment Day during the decade, and also fully mobilized to support biodiversity actions throughout the year in their programs. The Food and Agriculture Organization also engaged in a concerted efforts to support implementation of the Aichi biodiversity targets in their work. The culmination of this was the UN Summit on Biodiversity, convened by the President of the UN General Assembly on 30th September 2020, at the level of heads of state and government. The summit highlighted the crisis facing humanity from the degradation of biodiversity and the urgent need to accelerate action on biodiversity for sustainable development. However, even though we have made such strong efforts and contributions throughout the decade, none of the 20 Aichi biodiversity targets were fully met, but progress has been made on a few of them, with 6 targets being partially achieved, and thus, if scaled up, more and effective progress will be made. The knowledge gained from this experience, however, was crucial. It pointed out the need for transformative change in important areas such as food systems, land management, urban development, water systems, climate change policy, agricultural production, and in human and animal health. All of these pathways, learned as a result of activities during the decade, point to the need for urgent transformation to halt the ongoing and unprecedented loss of our planet's biodiversity. At the UN Summit on Biodiversity in New York last year, which coincided with the end of the UN Decade on Biodiversity, heads of state and government, global leaders in business and civil society, indigenous peoples and local communities, women and youth called for further commitments and actions to transform the way we live. Japan will always be remembered as the country that initiated this long journey as the host of the 10th Conference of the Parties to the Convention on Biological Diversity in 2010 in Aichi, Nagoya, a city where access and benefit sharing protocol was also adopted in the same year. At the opening of this event, I would like to express my sincere admiration for Japan and Japanese people for your leadership and the engagement. I urge you to continue these efforts to promote the mainstreaming of biodiversity. Perhaps this closing event of the UN Decade on Biodiversity can serve as a stepping stone towards continuing our efforts into the next decade by promoting the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration and the UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development, as well as the implementation of the Post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. So, the journey is still on until when we have all succeeded to bend the curve on biodiversity loss. We have just concluded the first part of COP15 in Kunming, China, where Kunming Declaration was adopted and several important pledges were made, including the continuation and expansion of Japan Biodiversity Fund. Sincere thanks to the government of Japan for its continued support on biodiversity conservation and protection through enhanced implementation of the Post-2020 framework expected to be adopted at the second part of the COP15 next year. Japan has shown the world successful model cases of biodiversity mainstreaming through national multi-stakeholder platforms such as the International Year on Biodiversity Japan and the UN Decade on Biodiversity Japan. I'm delighted that the UN Decade on Biodiversity National Committee has further evolved to the Japan Conference for the Achievement of the new Global Biodiversity Framework and will continue its activities as a role model for the whole of society approach and contribute to the implementation of the new global framework. Today's event is a precious opportunity for all of us to recall, recollect, and consolidate the achievements as well as the lessons learned from the UN Decade on Biodiversity and to continue our work towards achieving a sustainable future and living in harmony with nature. Thank you very much. Arigato.
Online webinar titled Japan's Contribution to the Post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, Passing the Baton, UNDB-J Experiences. I would also like to thank Executive Secretary Murema and the other staff in the CBD Secretariat and the speakers, as well as all the people who have participated in this event. Thank you very much. So let me say a few words on behalf of the organizer. We are now facing a very important juncture in the field of biodiversity. In next spring, the part 2 of CBD COP15 will be held, and towards that part 2, we have to make sure that the post-2020 global framework following the IG targets will be adopted. On the other hand, in the field of climate action, COP26 was held the other day, and various new commitments for climate action. For example, halting and reversing deforestation by 2030 was agreed upon by more than 100 countries. And the nature-based solutions integrating biodiversity conservation and climate actions are now being tackled. So far, the IG targets, which were adopted in Japan in 2010, and based on these targets, various efforts are being made worldwide, led by the CBD Secretariat, including the adoption of the UN Decade for Biodiversity. In Japan, we have been cooperating with various stakeholders, including the various agencies, NGOs, municipalities, and youth organizations by establishing Japan Committee for UN Decade on Biodiversity. On the other hand, we have already moving towards the next GBF. In August this year, we announced a concept to realize 30 by 30, and last month, we announced the increase of the contribution to Japan Biodiversity Fund. Once the GBF is adopted, we have to set up the national strategy within months, and we have already started our preparations. And we will start the trial system to certify the private sector managed land as OECM starting next year. And government will be involved in the TNFD so that we can support the mainstreaming in business. We will also further our efforts for biodiversity mainstreaming through facilitating citizens' individual behaviors through nudging. And today, we will share the achievements of UNDB-J and remaining challenges with the world. By transmitting them to the succeeding organization, we hope to contribute to the attainment of new global targets in Japan and the world based on the experience of and reflection on the Aichi targets. I hope that this event will give an impetus to your efforts for biodiversity conservation and will serve as a trigger for transformative changes for society and individual behavior. With that note, I would like to end my remarks. Thank you very much, and I look forward to a lively discussion today.
Secretary of the Convention on Biodiversity, and from the stakeholder point of view, we have the private sector and local governments and youth, and for the worldwide activities, there will be participation of the Ministry of the Environment and also the Secretary of the Convention of Biological Diversity. So to start with, from the Secretariat, the CBD, we would like to invite Mr. David Ainsworth to make his presentation. So Mr. Ainsworth, when you're ready, please.
The United Nations Decade on Biodiversity and the purposes that it served. I'll talk about the idea of raising awareness as a goal of the decade, the support that this awareness raising played for the strategic plan, and the question of mainstreaming. And I'll talk a little bit in concluding about the way forward as a result of these activities. So I would first tell you a very short story on how the Decade on Biodiversity came to be. This is a story about it began in 2010, the International Year of Biodiversity, which was a proposal and idea of the government of Japan. And in 2010, with the adoption of the Strategic Plan for Biodiversity that happened at COP10 in Nagoya. The theme for that particular year was biodiversity is life, biodiversity is our life. And it is with this slogan that people began to link the variety of life with the strength of our own lives as people. This International Year of Biodiversity provided the beginning impetus for everything that happened during the United Nations Decade on Biodiversity. All of these activities, begun because of the efforts of the government of Japan, made the basis for moving forward. The awareness raised in 2010 was very successful, and it led to celebrations around the world. As you can see, every corner provided celebrations to it. And so the Decade on Biodiversity was an opportunity to build on the success of that year. The United Nations General Assembly declared the decade, the United Nations Decade on Biodiversity, following on this success. The United Nations Decade on Biodiversity was designed to raise awareness on the value of biodiversity for human well-being. It was designed to help support the Strategic Plan for Biodiversity and its Aichi targets. And it was designed to contribute to mainstreaming biodiversity into the work of a variety of other sectors. The goal, living in harmony with nature across all sectors of society. The first goal of that strategic plan was to address the underlying causes of biodiversity loss by mainstreaming biodiversity across government and society. And awareness was a very important part of this. This is why the first target of the strategic plan was to say that by 2020, people are aware of the values of biodiversity and the steps they can take to conserve and use it sustainably. So therefore, the program of work on communication, education, and public awareness during the decade was structured and guided by these principles. As a result of activity during the decade, we saw successful changes in people's awareness. Awareness rose all around the world from the year 2011 to 2020. You can see here a map of the world put together with results from the UEBT Biodiversity Barometer. And this shows biodiversity awareness around the world. And it showed increases in all countries around the world in awareness during the decade. We also saw during the decade a survey by the World Association of Zoos and Aquariums that demonstrated how additional actions and teachings can raise awareness. More recently, just this year, the Economist Intelligence Unit did a survey, showed the emergence of an eco-consciousness, another result of the work that we did during the decade. The Waza Zoo survey is an example of how our work made a difference. The zoo survey looked at people who came to a zoo, looked at the animals and looked at interpretation activities and showed a transformation in their awareness. As you can see, they understood more biodiversity after visiting the zoo, and they had a greater knowledge of actions to help protect biodiversity. This showed the results and activities that we did during the year. And the challenges that were met. We did see that people began to act and carry out goals and share with each other the ways that we can all save biodiversity. It was also evident that people began to demand that different economic sectors act for biodiversities. And as we have seen and will see in other presentations, businesses have responded to this increased demand by people. And people have begun to link biodiversity with other environmental or sustainable development issues. The examples that just recently happened at COP26 with the Forest Declaration and the discussion of nature throughout the discussions is another proof of this growth of transformation. The framework for action of all of this and the targets also, as it was pointed out by the Executive Secretary, became the overarching framework for biodiversity for the entire United Nations system, taking the message of biodiversity and putting it across all UN agencies. As a result of this, the new strategy to work is that now the Secretariat works with the parties and with a group called the Biodiversity Communications Flotilla to raise awareness. There's a new partnership, a new sharing of information that will help to raise awareness even further. We're also working with other sectors to raise awareness, including business sectors, including finance sectors, agriculture, forestry, and others. And also mainstreaming will actually benefit from this raised awareness and contribute to it as well. So in the new activities that were developed as a result of the Decade on Biodiversity, we developed a participatory messages for a global campaign through the Biodiversity Communications Flotilla. We also do communications work with more communities around the world. We work with zoos, we work with botanical gardens, we work with the membership of the IUCN Commission for Education and Communication. We work with youth, business and consumers, and media. And we support many other initiatives and communications projects. The engagement with youth is much stronger than ever before. We see with the Global Youth Biodiversity Network, there's incredibly strong work. With business, including working with agencies and businesses in Japan, and also through the Business for Nature Coalition, we are communicating more. We work with agriculture. We work with indigenous peoples and local communities, and also do work with Action for Sustainable Development through RCEs and with UNESCO. The reasons that business should be involved, we'll hear more about later, but it's very clear that we can communicate all of these different opportunities we see here. There can be market leadership, good relations with regulators, a much lower insurance premiums for businesses, access to new eco-conscious ethical funds, long-term stability of supply and viability, enhanced employee loyalty, bioprospecting, lower overall supply management costs, and embracing changes in ways of doing business. Also, this communication effort looks for identifying main issues for other sectors and then communicating the role of biodiversity as a solution to these challenges. So this means looking at mainstreaming in issues of food security for agriculture, water security for the questions of cities and forests, sustainable consumption, disaster risk reduction. The Nagoya Protocol also provides new opportunities for the sustainable use of biodiversity, and also health and nutrition. Throughout the United Nations Decade on Biodiversity, we grew our presence on social media. And so now we use Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram as a very important platform to communicate with a number of different groups. Our Instagram community now has 300,000 active members, one of the largest platforms that we see. Thank you very much for giving me these few minutes to tell you a little bit about the examples we have done to move forward on awareness and the things we'll do in the future. I look forward to seeing the other presentations, and I look forward to further action and leadership from Japan on these issues. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you very much. So we have learned that there's been a lot of deliverables in the past 10 years. And next, we would like to have the presentation by Mr. Yagai of Ministry of the Environment from the Office of Biodiversity about the UNDB-J and the initiatives of the Japanese government. Good morning, everyone. My name is Yagai from the Office of Biodiversity Mainstream from the Ministry of the Environment. Thank you for this opportunity. So, as mentioned by the Executive Secretary, I would like to talk about the UNDB. And today, so you can see the slides. So let me begin my presentation. So, as the Secretary Murama said, the UNDB was first of all proposed by the civil sector of Japan, and the Japanese government made a proposal to the United Nations. So between 2010, 2011, and 2020, there was the United Nations Biodiversity Decade, and so we need to make sure that we, as Japan, as a country, must take a robust step. That's why this Japan Committee was formulated. And so this is about the more specific framework and the initiatives, as you see, the countries and also the local governments and the business community, the cultural figures, others, and also the academic experts joined this Japan Committee for UNDB. And so, as Mr. Ainsworth also mentioned, one of the target one of the IG target is to secure the value of the biodiversity and encourage people to be aware of the biodiversity. Making awareness is very important. Based upon that, action will come. And therefore, in particular, the information sharing, education, and collaboration, and the promotion of business side initiatives have been part of the activities for behavioral change. And you can see the examples of the activities such as the education, and we have a commendation system, and also to schools. There's the book box for the books on biodiversity and giving donations of books on biodiversity. And also there's the promotion by setting up a committee in different levels. And there's been a lot of meetings, such as national meeting on the biodiversity, and also the regional forum, and also internationally too. We shared our activity information in the UN venues, for instance. And so one of the initiatives I would like to introduce you is the My Action Declaration. And this is for individuals so that we can encourage the individuals, their actions on the biodiversity, and they use the check sheet with the 5 questions. And this was supported by 260,000 people. And so this was an initiative with a lot of cooperation, a large number of people. And also in the information dissemination and advertising, we use the ambassadors and also some public figures, and also we have characters, the mascots, to as a cheerleader, so the supporters of this UNDB-J activities, so that information will be shared on biodiversity. And also there's the magazines entitled Ikitomo on Facebook, and also some books were also published. And other than that, through for the encouragement of the business-related activities, we formulated the guideline for the businesses, and we amended. And so we made this guideline in 2009, but we amended it in 2017 so that the businesses can also mainstream biodiversity in their day-to-day business activities. In addition to that, in the industry level, not just the company level, we also made the guidelines so that the industry associations can encourage their member companies to formulate the action plans for biodiversity. And in regards to these activities in 2015, we made the interim evaluation and interim report. And so there's been a steady progress in the realm of biodiversity, but the awareness across people was not enhanced enough. So the existing activities seem to be not enough. Therefore, we made the roadmap for further enhancement of the awareness. At the bottom, you can see that there's a target set by each sector, and initiatives will be in place to achieve the target. And based on that, by 2020, we have continued with our initiatives. And in regards to the evaluation of each target, so there's a global evaluation and a domestic evaluation. When it comes to the international evaluation, there was a GBO5 made by the experts. And the yellow part are the targets partially achieved, and the red is, so there are 7 of them, and in progress 38. And as Secretary Moyama said, in regards to the IT target, there was not enough achievement. There's been a progress, but out of the 20 targets, there's none that's being completed. And the reason is I think there are many ways to interpret this. So the level and also the background of the goal setting was not enough. And on the right is the domestic evaluation. And as far as Japan is concerned, we have reorganized the 20 Aichi targets into 13 targets. And of the 13, we evaluate that the 5 has been achieved. But that means that the remaining 8 is not achieved yet. So this means that the 30 to 40% was the rate of achievement of the national target. And so this is something that we're fully aware of. So the quantitative target setting and also the progress management was not enough. So that's been pointed out by the experts and the evaluators. And based on these things pointed out, then so as the succeeding organization, we have established the Japan Conference for 2030 Global Biodiversity Framework in November in 2010. And one of the characteristics of their activities is that they will involve the business and also the regional cooperation and also the behavior change working groups to be more specific in the initiatives. And for instance, the business, there's a PM3, so there's an information disclosure, and also with the regional collaboration, there's the biodiversity local government network, and also with these activities towards 2030, we would like to make sure to achieve all the targets. Thank you very much. That's all from me.
Thank you very much. And next, I would like to invite Mr. Hasegawa from Keidanren to talk about their activities in the business sector. My name is Hasegawa from the Keidanren Committee for Conservation of Nature. And thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. So based on this slide, I would like to give you the overview of our activities. First of all, about the Keidanren Committee on Nature Conservation. This was established, the Keidanren established its Keidanren Charter for Earth Environment in 1991. And as an organization to put that charter into practice, we established this Keidanren Committee on Nature Conservation in 1992. And Catering has a membership of 1,461 companies and 189 organizations. And out of that, about 100 members are also members of this committee. And these are the three major activities. First of all, educational activities for member companies. Secondly, the support through our fund for the conservation of nature. And third is building an environment for the business sector so that it would be easier for them to work on biodiversity. So I would like to share with you the achievements on these three pillars of activities. As for the educational activities, Catering Committee on Nature Conservation, jointly with Catering, have set up the Declaration of Biodiversity as well as the guidelines for action in 2009, 1 year prior to 2010 COP10 in Nagoya. And after that, in 2018, because we thought it was important to adapt ourselves to the SDGs and the Paris Agreement, so we made a revision. And one is the role of the top management is now clearly indicated in this declaration and the guidelines for action. And the second point is that the global biodiversity is important, but also the biodiversity is varied depending on the region. So the local activities are very important. And having said that, the consideration should be given to the global supply chain. And the third is that the environmental issues are also important other than the biodiversity, focus on circular economy and so forth. And this kind of activities should be incorporated in the business management. And through utilizing this declaration, we have undertaken the initiatives of Keidanren's Declaration on Biodiversity. This was set up in last year, and we also created a brochure on this initiative. And this is already posted on our website in English. So we support. We call on our member companies to support this initiative, and 240 companies and groups have expressed their support. Out of them, 118 companies and organizations have provided the examples of their activities for the future and the specific examples of their activities. And we have opened the website, and we are soliciting the support from many more companies. So if any company is interested in doing so, please access that website, and we solicit the support from more companies. And we have also created a compilation of examples of business sector activities on biodiversity in cooperation with the Ministry of the Environment of Japan. More specifically, and the new Global Biodiversity Framework, which is going to be adopted in the next COP. And the current draft has 21 objectives. And we have put up the examples that are contributing to the achievement of these 21 objectives. We have also created a video in order to let the world know what we are doing in order to contribute to the next GBF. And Japan Business and Biodiversity Partnership is another activity. And this is a photo coming from the 9th general meeting held last year. So Keidanren and Japan Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Japan Association of Corporate Executives, 3 major business organizations in Japan have participated in this partnership, and 490 organizations and companies also take part. So we have been conducting these awareness raising activities in the last 10 years. So what was the progress made? And in order to grasp the level of awareness and achievement, we have conducted a survey on biodiversity. The Japan Association of Corporate Executives, as well as the Keidanren Committee on Nature Conservation, conducted this survey. And as for the awareness of the companies, in 2019, about 39, in 2011, 39 companies were aware of it, which increased in 2019 to 75%. And the number of companies who have incorporated the perspective of biodiversity in their business management policies have also increased. And the companies who disclose information related to biodiversity increased from 40% to 70%. And as to the question of whether they have put certain financial investments on this arena too, the number of companies increased from 40% to 70%. And in the Declaration on Biodiversity of Keidanren, we asked the companies what aspect they have incorporated from the declaration in their business management policy. A wide issue of climate change and the environmental issues are incorporated in their business management plan, as well as the supply chain management, including the resource management, and also the understanding of the relationship between biodiversity and business business activities. The rate is now 40%. And also whether the top management sends out the message of their own words about the biodiversity, it's still not very much. And so this is one of the challenges, I think. And as was referred to by Executive Secretary Morema in her video message, we have been conducting the various meetings with the CBD Secretariat, and we are also exchanging views on the developments of TNFD and so forth. And the next theme is the support of the projects through Keidanren's Fund for Nature Conservation. And 4.4 billion yen, total of 4.4 billion yen of support was given to various projects, mostly in Asian countries. And we are conducting the meetings to listen to the reports from the NGOs that we supported. We are also contributing to the regional vitalization through nature conservation and biodiversity conservation. But I will skip these slides. And as for the building the enabling environment for the business sector, so as for this Post-2020 Biodiversity Framework, we have established the working group on that. And the second point is the activities related to the TNFD on disclosure of information on biodiversity. And we participate in the TNFD forum. And as was explained by the Ministry of the Environment, and we are now responding to the revised version of the guideline for the private sector on biodiversity. So we have been conducting these activities. As for the future activities, so these three pillars of activities that I have explained will be the main pillars in the future activities. We also will provide the support to NGOs through our fund. And the third is the building the environment where the private sector can work on biodiversity issues. That's it from me. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hasegawa, for this concise presentation. Next, I would like to call upon the two persons from the Aichi Prefecture. And so I'd like to, first of all, invite Mr. Sugimoto of the Aichi Prefecture, the Natural Environment section, and also Mr. Mori of the Environment Affairs Bureau of the Environmental Planning Department. So my name is Sugimoto. Hello, everyone. I'm from the Aichi Prefecture government. And I would like to talk about the Aichi Prefecture initiatives as the hosting location of the COP10. Looking back in 2005, Aichi Prefecture hosted the Aichi Expo with the theme of the nature's wisdom. And after that, in 2010, the COP10 of CBD was held, and this brought the major changes in the awareness among the citizens on the environment. In this COP10, the Aichi target, which is the global target towards 2020, was adopted. And for the achievement of this target, Aichi Prefecture has been working on the number of initiatives by setting up the Biodiversity Strategy 2020. In particular, we focused on the collaboration with the university, NPO, corporations, and the administration under the name of the Ecosystem Network Council. And there's been 9 councils so far has been started, and in total 280, more than 280 groups have joined. In this council, we will so these councils work on the individual activities such as the eradication of the invasive alien species and biotopes and so forth. And also the next generation is succeeded by the youth through the Gaia, GAIA activities. And they are conserving the biodiversity as well as disseminating information. In addition, our prefecture is working in collaboration with the international peers. In 2016, we have invited a number of local governments in other countries in the biodiversity area to start the international, the wide area, the local government cooperation towards the achievement of Aichi target. The 9 local governments joined, and in April last year, towards COP15, we have been cooperating with the Edinburgh process, which collects the voices of local governments of the world. And this voices will be compiled into Edinburgh Declaration. And so this has become a strong message for the parties. And we have collected more than 200 the local governments, which joined the petition. And in Japan, Japan actually boasts the highest number of petition, which is 54 groups. And in 2020, as a closing of the CBD, since COP10, we have hosted Aichi Nagoya Biodiversity Expo with the Ministry of the Environment, UNDB-J, and Nagoya City. We have adopted the Biodiversity 2020 Aichi Nagoya Declaration. And last year, we have also solicited, in cooperation with the Nagoya City, the Aichi Nagoya Biodiversity Best Practices. We have collected more than 140 good practices, and we would like to compile this into a brochure. In closing, towards the next 10 years, in February this year, we have formulated a new policy, which is Aichi Biodiversity Strategy 2030, involving the people in the region and also youth, so that we will make the solid contribution to the achievement of the next round of a global target. I hope to have your continued support. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Next up, from the Nagoya City, we would like to make a presentation. Now, my name is Mori from the Nagoya City of the Environment Affairs Bureau and Environmental Planning Department of Nagoya City Government. And I would like to explain to you the initiatives taken by Nagoya City. First, in terms of the preservation of the biodiversity, we have much progress with the citizens' collaboration. And in September 2011, following year of COP10, we have established the Nagoya Biodiversity Center. And this is the center of the activities. And at the same time, the Nagoya, the collaboration and the cooperation platform. And so this is under the name of Nagoya Biodiversity Conservation Activity Council. And more than 40 groups have joined in this council. And they are very active. And so this Biodiversity Center and also the Conservation Activity Council have been very active in proceeding with the number of survey and conservation activities. And also, in terms of the utilization of the sustainability, and so the fair trade town was Nagoya was accredited as the second fair trade town in Japan in 2015. And high school students, university students are very active in fair trade activities in Nagoya. And they are a great driving force for the fair trade activities in our city. And also, in terms of the education, there's an initiative by Nagoya Environment University. So this university was started in 2005 when the Aichi Expo took place. And this is a very unique learning network participated by the citizens groups, corporations, educational institutions, and the local government. And so many thousands of people have joined so far. And so many people take a podium to teach. And so this is expected to further accelerate activities on biodiversity. Now, in closing, I would like to talk about the cooperation between the local governments in Japan. This too, in 2011, this network was established, and the purpose is to share information, cooperate, and also disseminate information. And so Nagoya is the representing city at the moment, and 185 local governments have joined. So the outcome so far, every year we host a forum, and rather the locations rotate between the member local governments, and also we have established the rice paddy subcommittee in 2015, and 5 local governments joined. And also on the day of the international biodiversity across the country, all these member local governments have been hosted some events to disseminate information. And in this, the local government network, we have been exchanging opinions on a regular basis. And this now started as a new activity. And so that these activities will become truly effective and beneficial. And we're going to increase the number of subcommittees with the concrete targets to resolve. And also, this will be also a venue to gain the information as well as the personal network. And also, the representative, the local governments take turns each year. And as the hosting city of Nagoya City, we wish to make further contributions. So we have nominated ourselves as one of the representing cities. And also, in order to reduce the burden of the cities, we would like to use more online meeting venues. And based on all of these activities, in September 2011, Nagoya City has become the representative to establish the subcommittee for the PR and information dissemination. And as of September, 67 local governments have joined, and we have been exchanging information and opinions online. And we've conducted 2 meetings to talk about the enhancing the awareness on biodiversity, and also the local strategy, and also about the foreign the invasive species and also the rare species, and we are sharing information. So it's quite simple, but these are the activities of Nagoya City government. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. So the next is from the youth group, Ms. Kikawa from Japan Youth Biodiversity Network. Can you see the screen? Yes. Good morning. My name is Arisa Kikawa from Japan Youth Biodiversity Network, and I'd like to talk about what we have done in the last 10 years. And first of all, about our network. We are the youth group working on biodiversity and various issues, and we are composed of students and the other young people. So we are about 40 membership from different universities, as well as people who have already graduated from schools. And about our activities, there are 3 pillars. First of all, education on biodiversity, what it means and what its significance towards the young people. And through events on education, we are trying to create a network of young people. And through such activities, we put together the policy proposals from the youth. And based on the network that we have created through these activities, we will again educate other young people. And first of all, about educational activities, Let's Do Eco Lab is one of the events. And we organize events in order to share with other students and young people so that we can increase the number of those students who will work on biodiversity. And this is an example of our work together with the students from Kinki University. And for elementary school students, we create some quiz for the elementary school kids about the various animals and the in the world, so that we can create opportunities for young people and children to get interested in biodiversity. Next is a network activity. And specifically, we issue a white paper of youth on biodiversity, and we conduct some research and surveys about the youth activities on biodiversity, and we take statistics from them, and we publish the report. And based on that, we know that the understanding of biodiversity is increasing. On the other hand, more than 50% of the surveyed said that they do not know about the Aichi targets. As for conservation organizations, they face the shortages of the human resources as well as knowledge and education. And environmental rangers and the staff in the environmental organizations and the staff of the Ministry of the Environment were interviewed by our members, so that we can also have the opportunities to connect with people who are actually working in related sectors. Next is the policy proposals. And we conduct the study group to study the policy proposals, international policy proposals. And so we have a periodic study sessions on biodiversity convention. And about this photo, and we had an exchange of views meeting with the former Minister of Environment, Mr. Koizumi. And there are other youth organizations working on climate change or SDGs. And in collaboration with those other groups, we put together the policy proposals. And I would like to give you one example of an event that we conducted with Gibbon. And what's Gibbon? Gibbon stands for Global Youth Biodiversity Network. And the purpose of this organization is to address the loss of biodiversity as soon as possible. Normally, we work individually in each country, but at the CBD COP and other events, we gather together to put together policy recommendations and the opinions of young people. And we also announced the youth initiative. And our network is involved in this Gibbon network. And last year, we conducted the career development meeting to promote and raise awareness of biodiversity. And last year, as a member of Gibbon Japan, we also implemented this event in cooperation with the other organization called KAND, and nearly 50 people participated, and youth from Japan and Southeast Asia participated in this event. So this event was held for 3 days, and from day 1 to day 3, I would like to show you some slides. First of all, day 1, we had an exchange meeting, self-introduction, and also explanation about the actions we do. And we also had a studying session in order to share the basic understanding what is the biodiversity, what is ecosystem service, CBD, COP, Aichi targets, and post-Aichi targets. Day 2, we also talked about what biodiversity means to each of us. And then we also talked about the biodiversity loss and what we should do. Day 3, this was a very rich experience for us. We had an opportunity to do some analysis based on system thinking. And the views expressed were organized in this diagram on right top. So we learn about the system-wide analysis, and then we discussed, how we can leverage this system to see where we can make the most desired impact, and also to learn and adapt as the system changes. When the problem is not fully understood, for example, and when there is a diversity or conflict of opinions, we discuss how we can use the system thinking. So these are the examples of how we can use the system thinking. For example, when there is diverse and dynamic interrelations in the broader environment, and when there are multiple drivers that are indirectly influencing the system, or how we can make sustained impact at a broader scale. So this is the latest event that we organized in collaboration with other organizations. So that's it from me. Thank you very much.
世界のユースとのつながりもあるという動きもご紹
Thank you
介を
very much. So there was also a talk with the connection with the international peers as well. Then we would like to call upon Suzuki-san of the CBD Secretariat to talk about the Biodiversity Fund. As introduced, my name is Suzuki from the Secretariat of CBD. And so can you see the screen? Not yet. Okay, I have it now. Thank you. Thank you very much for this opportunity today. So then let me start my presentation on the Japan Biodiversity Fund, about the activities so far, and also the view for the future. And so for Japanese government, which has been the host country of the COP10, the funding has been the great concern, and the 2020, and also the Southern Initiative, and so there's been, in order to support the implementation of the agreements in COP10, the Convention of Biodiversity Fund was established in the CBD Secretariat. And there are three main characteristics of the CBD Fund Japan. And so one is the stability and flexibility. In total, $60 million fund at the early stage of the establishment was provided to the CBD Secretariat, and so all of it was delivered to CBD Secretariat, so that the management team, the exclusive management team, is managing the fund, and also the Japan fund is specified on the capacity building. And this also supplements the EU fund, which supports the policy making. And with the continuous support, this actually encouraged the other funds to cooperate with the CBD. And this shows the proportions of the voluntary contributions, and so you can see that 3.1%, the majority of the contribution is made by Japan, and for CBD Secretariat. So you can see the scale of funds from Japan and its importance. In 2010, in COP10, each target and the strategic plan 2011-2020 was adopted, and at the same time, the UNDB was adopted at General Assembly of the United Nations, and so this Biodiversity Fund has been continuing its activity for UNDB and also strategic plan, and this fund will continue to make a contribution to the next round of the global framework. Next, I would like to talk about the main activities of the Japan Biodiversity Fund so far. First of all, the fund was involved in the regional workshop. In addition, in order to materialize the Satoyama initiative, there was the Comdex project and also the CB and portfolio project to implement the agreements in the CBD Secretariat. In 2013, the interim evaluation or the review was made, and since then, there's been pilot projects have been put in place with more specificity in its contents. And this shows the regional workshop and so this is called the NBSAP, and so this is the Biodiversity National Strategy and Action Plan, which was and this shows the global workshop. And unfortunately, the Aichi target 17 was not completely achieved, but as of July 2020, 170 countries have amended the NBSAP, which is equivalent to 85% of all the parties. And the Comdex project in based on the Satoyama initiative concept, as stipulated in COP10, has been put in place in 20 countries in the world. And so this takes a lead. This is led by UNDP for its implementation, and Satoyama Initiative International Partnership, and also the United Nations University, Ministry of the Environment, GF, are part of the strong supporters. And the pilot project, based on the, is one of the activities which was conducted based on the interim review. And this is based on a concept that NBSAP is to be implemented in the national level. And there's been 5 projects conducted so far in 7 different countries. And the voluntary peer review process is the multiple countries will review each other in terms of the NBSAP and its implementation level. And so we cooperated with Switzerland and Norway and to conduct reviews in 5 countries. So Biodiversity Japan Fund also kept supporting the departments which are working on the programs in the Secretariat, such as the ABS protocol, Cartagena protocol, and also the Sustainable Ocean Initiative, and also UNDB, invasive species and protection zone use support, and are some of the examples of program support. And some additional programs following COP10 includes the DRR, ecosystem DRR, it's called, and the scientific assessment of the ecosystem, and also IPBES capability development project, which utilizes the outcome of the scientific assessment. So IGES, WMC, and so we have this has been put in place with such partners. And just the other day, in the COP15, in the summit and also ministerial conference, Minister Yamaguchi of Japan has announced that in total, $70 million support in the second term of the Japan Fund. And so this Biodiversity Japan Fund will be possible so that there will be the continued support from the Aichi target. And from Aichi target to the global framework. And I would like to take this opportunity to express our gratitude. And so we'd like to work with the parties as well as the partner organizations to support the implementation of the convention as well as the protocol. I would like to have your continued support. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So we have done with the first part, and so we are going to the second part towards the further mainstreaming of biodiversity, as well as the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. And the coordinator is the acting chair of J-GBF, Professor Wakui. So Mr. Wakui and other panelists, please put your camera on. So I hand over the microphone to Professor Wakui. Yes, my name is acting chair, and my name is Wakui. I'm an acting chair of J-GBF. Thank you for your participation. As you know, from 2010, to be most precise, from September 2011, UNDB-J was established, and in the last 10 years, we experienced, because of the COVID-19, I have been acting chair for the last 12 years because of the COVID-19. And we listened to the panelists who shared with us the activities they have done. But on the other hand, the Executive Secretary Mrema and Mr. David Ainsworth and Mr. Suzuki talked about, they all, highly praised Japan's activities. UNDB-J does not have this sense that we have been able to achieve what we should have achieved. So we are frustrated in that sense, but I do thank for the praise. And we understand that there are difficult challenges ahead, and I would like to pay my respect to all of you. So first of all, what are the remaining challenges from the last decade? So from the Catering Committee on Nature Conservation and Aichi Prefecture and Nagoya City, and from the Japan Biodiversity Youth Biodiversity Network have shared with us some keywords. And so we would like to start our discussion starting with those keywords first. So from Catering Committee on Nature Conservation, would you like to start? Yes, thank you, Wakui-san. So the keyword about the remaining challenges, that is mainstreaming in business firms. I shared with you the results of our survey. So within companies, the companies are working on biodiversity, but we have to further support such activities. So that's why I put up this keyword. And to understand the link between the business activities and biodiversity, and the environmental load of the business activities in terms of the business biodiversity, these are to be understood. And there are 2 or 3 important things in that relation. First of all, the top management should commit to this. And we have come up with the declaration on biodiversity, but we should further promote such commitment by the top management. The second is the understanding of consumers. The consumers should be more aware of which companies are more aware of the biodiversity issues, and these companies should be evaluated accordingly. And another is how we can motivate people to work on biodiversity, which I think will be discussed later on. So these are the major points through which we would like to further promote mainstreaming in business sector, and we hope that that will contribute to preservation of biodiversity. Thank you very much. Especially the question of traceability in the supply chain. And such a system should be ensured. And the consumers pay for the quality ensured through such supply chain management of biodiversity, and that would be an ideal. So how how mainstreaming will be promoted is very important. Next is from Aichi Prefecture. Thank you. So these keywords from us are behavioral change. This is related to mainstreaming of biodiversity, and we have not made enough progress in behavioral change, and that's one of the challenges that remain from the decade. And since COP10, we are cooperating with various stakeholders in order to mainstream the biodiversity. People may be interested in nature, but they still are reluctant to take actions. And in July last year, the Aichi prefecture conducted a survey with the citizens in the prefecture, and those who responded they are interested in nature was at 70%. However, if they are asked if they are participating in different kind of activities to preserve the nature, that was 1.2%. And so although they have interest in the nature surrounding themselves, and they do have the appreciation for the nature, but it's important that we make them to act. And in February this year, we set up a new strategy towards the next new framework to accelerate the mainstreaming of biodiversity. And that's the major pillar of our activities in the next strategy. And Aichi Prefecture would like to support the people so that they can take actions. That's it from me. Thank you very much. Transformative change is the buzzword. That means that we have to think about how we can backcast from the tipping point so that we can promote the behavioral change. That's very important. But how we define behavior. For example, Nijumaru project to which we have gotten support. But maybe we should start from our day-to-day activities so that we can raise the awareness about the benefits that we get from the biodiversity. And from COVID-19 on, One Health is the word, the health of the earth and the health of the human beings are interrelated. And so there is a better understanding of it right now. So I think we can interconnect all those different aspects. So Nagoya City, would you like to? Yes. Would you please take down your slide so that I can share my slide? Institutionalization and education. Of course, education is a very important aspect and we should continue work on that. However, education and awareness raising has certain limits and we must admit to that, I think. Because in the COVID-19 pandemic, about the masks and the vaccines, there are different views among people, and certain times it's difficult to communicate our message. So as for biodiversity, we have to put more focus on institutionalizing the systems which would benefit the biodiversity, even if people are not aware. But if people see only the products that have taken into account the biodiversity and they can choose from those products, and that would eventually lead to preserving more biodiversity. And we have the restoration of living things in cities project in the office buildings in the city center. And with cooperation of citizens, we are trying to restore the living things, restore the ecosystem in the cities. And through such activities, we are trying to raise awareness of the people. And through this kind of activities, we are stepping on further. We're making a further step. It's not just about education. We are taking more steps, actions, so that such activities will contribute to awareness raising. And so this is a kind of activities that we have begun. So I would like to emphasize the importance of institutionalization. Thank you very much. Nagoya City has opened the Nagoya Open University of the Environment online, and I hope that that will be fully utilized so that the NBS nature-based solutions, the social issues can be solved through nature, and this kind of approach should also be disseminated wider to the other to wider people.
はい。ご紹介に預かりました若者ネットの
Next, from the Wakamono Network, Kika speaking. And so this shows the making crisis a personal affair. So the lack of mainstreaming of biodiversity must be the point, the key issue. And the climate change is now recognized as the global issue. And so the other day, the COP26 was held, and it was widely covered by the media as well. And there was but then in regards to the CBD, the COP 10, then which was held online, did not gather so much attention. And that's symbolic of the attention on the biodiversity. And the CO2 actually is so, and its emission reduction is easier to visualize in terms of the target and goal. But when it comes to biodiversity and the deteriorated biodiversity, how it would affect our lives is not so clearly communicated. When it comes to climate change, we can have the tangible experiences such as days being extremely hot or cold. But when it comes to biodiversity, let's bring back to the natural forest, and then why. What's the point? Then what is the reason behind it is so not so clear. And the artificial forest or the plantation basically does not allow the variety of the vegetation, and then it eventually causes the natural disaster. So if unless we make this step-by-step explanation, it is not easy for people to actually feel the need of biodiversity. And so this is a characteristics of biodiversity, but how to make it the personal affair, I think it is the key and a challenge for our activities going forward. Thank you. And so what we can do as youth is to collaborate with other activities. That's the best thing. And we are working on the biodiversity. And so we say that so the challenge is that we are only acting upon our subjective view that the biodiversity needs to be recovered. And but we can work with the influencers, the use of SNS, and also the word research. I mean, there are other experts who know better than we do, and we would like to expand on the network with the experts and the influencers, and that would be necessary, and that will help people understand that there is a crisis on the biodiversity, so that there'll be more awareness. Thank you. So we have a lot of expectation to the youth, and in January this year, on the 11th and 12th, there was the biodiversity torch relay in with the cooperation of Nagoya City and Aichi Prefecture. 7,300 people joined, and the youth ambassador to basically hand over the. So we'd like you to hand over the torch of biodiversity to the coming generations. And so climate change is, in a sense, easy to understand with the damage to the daily life. But then biodiversity actually needs to be looked at with the viewpoint that it supports a day-to-day life. And so this is not something that is that's eye-catching, but then this is something for day-to-day life. So our enriched life is a result of biodiversity, and people need to be aware of it. So next speaker from the Ministry of the Environment. So there's been a lot of things pointed out by the speakers and other speakers, and from the standpoint of the Ministry of the Environment in the position to protect the national environment, there are a lot of reflections, and so one of the problems that is that we as a ministry failed to indicate the easy to understand the targets and also the index or indices or goals. And with climate change, it is clear in the people's mind that they can contribute by saving energy and saving materials. But then with the biodiversity, we could not indicate such a clear and easy to understand actions of the people. And also the CBDR. So this is something that we will work with the targets, and I think we need to work on more indicating the clearer targets for people. Thank you. So from the CBD Secretariat, next, please. Suzuki-san? I think David may be a better respondent for this question.
Okay, thank you. Can I see the question again? Pardon me.
So the question is, so upon hearing this discussion, so this is the most important point. Based on the challenge, what will be needed to ensure the achievement of the next framework? Are you able to see the screen? Are you
Yes, I can.
the,
thank you.
Questions?
Yes, I can see the question. Thank you very, very much. So based on the challenges that we've discussed here, I think we can identify a couple of the main areas, and in some ways I will repeat what has been said by the panelists before. I think awareness is extremely important, but awareness in a way that leads to changes in behavior. And this is not just for individuals as consumers, but this is also for businesses and for people in their economic activities. So we need to look at this awareness of the values of biodiversity for people as producers, people as agriculture, people as others. So that's one important part, is to move on this area. And this notion of behavioral change and nudging is very, very important. The second part of it is that the framework will only be successful if indeed it engages everyone. So if this mainstreaming effort is very, very broad. One of the advantages of the discussions for the framework now is it is assumed that it is a framework across society, across sectors, and also across different agreements. So this broad basis, if we can make this happen, will be a very, very important way to move forward on it. And then I also want to agree with all the discussions about monitoring, because one of the challenges we had with the last framework is we didn't gather information in a way that allowed us to understand the results of our policies quickly, and therefore allowed us to make adjustments quickly. So the new framework needs to have a verification and monitoring component that can respond to changes very, very quickly, capture changes very, very quickly, and then allow policymakers and everybody indeed to make those kind of changes. I think these elements are there in the framework from the lessons that we've learned. I think there will be a more importance on awareness of the values of biodiversity for many sectors. I think the framework will have an idea of a broad basis for action. And if the parties can act and move quickly, we'll have a very strong monitoring framework that'll allow us to have the information we need to make these differences. Thank you. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. So it was a very helpful viewpoint and explanation. And with the UNDB-J 10 years, when we look back on it, so for the corporations, I think there's a good permeation in place. But when it comes to the general public, when it comes to the true nature of the biodiversity convention or the framework, in Japan, in particular, the public could not develop the full understanding or awareness. But the biodiversity is indispensable in a day-to-day life. That's the very foundation of our daily life. And that awareness, how deeply was it? Did it spread? I think to a certain extent, I think we succeeded in spreading this idea. And so then, in COP15, so October is the first meeting, and a high-level meeting will be held in May 2022 in Kunming, China, with a high possibility. And there, in Kunming, there will be the post-UNDB will be discussed. And in that, the challenges that we are aware of now will be the base, so that to set the framework for the next framework, and what will be needed to ensure to achieve the next framework. And so with some keywords. So first, I would like the Hasegawa-san of the Catering to start. Thank you very much for the introduction. And so it says that visualize and incentivize. So I would like to be quick. And so there's been some indications, and also the goals have been discussed earlier. But then it's not easy to see. So visualizing and incentivizing, I think, is very important.
But this is a difficult thing to do, and there is no single solution to it. But towards that, we have to make efforts. And the users of the indicators also, should consider that these are not probably the only solutions, but some indicators that they can use. And the Catering Committee on Nature Conservation would like to actively participate in the forum to discuss the indicators. And if it's difficult to tackle all those indicators, but they can utilize the guidelines created by the Ministry of the Environment, and in order to understand what they should do, because these indicators are helpful in realizing what they should do. Indeed, the visualizing is very important to incentivize. The visualizing is a new word, but I think it's a very good word. Next, from municipalities, first from Aichi Prefecture. Yes. And we would like to say that the power of youth and business should be utilized. And in the next GBF, and to ensure the implementation of the global framework, we humans should really take into account the nature in our behavior. And And the youth of and the power of youth and businesses are very important. And the civic organizations are fully active in this field, and the businesses are also active in this. We need a new power. And let me share with you some example in the Chita Peninsula in Aichi Prefecture, facing the seas. And there are many factories of large companies with a stretch of 10 kilometers in total. And the companies have their own factories there, and they have some green areas around the factories. So far, each company was managing the greenery on their own, but since the COP10, these companies got together and worked with citizens and students to work on building a wider ecosystem. As a result, 12 factories stretching over 10 kilometers in total have created one ecosystem. So this is one example. So this is a very good example of, I think, building an ecosystem. There, the young people brought in fresh ideas, and also they brought in their power to act. And businesses, of course, have the organizational power and also the sustained power of implementing things. So based on these examples, we think that the power of youth and business should be fully utilized in the new GBF. Thank you very much. Indeed, there was a story of a fox, which we used to read when we were children. But your example reminds me of this story about the fox, and we now see these animals are returning to the ecosystem where they used to live. Nagoya City, please. Yes, thank you very much. Role sharing and specialization are the keywords, and because we do not have much time left before we can implement the global framework. One Health is now the buzzword, and so we have to increasingly respond to interconnected issues, including climate change, and we have to speed up our actions. And any organization has limitations in human resources and money and time. So, role sharing among different organizations should be promoted in order to avoid duplication of work and to ensure a better efficiency. And we also have to identify who needs to act in order to make the effect greatest. Maybe the central government should take an action in certain things rather than municipalities, or in other cases, municipalities should take the lead. So this kind of role sharing and specialization should be promoted. Thank you. I think there is a different approach in terms of biodiversity in comparison with the climate change. In climate change, it's from global to local, but in biodiversity, it's reverse. It's from the local to the global. And there, the roles the municipalities can play are very important, and especially the role of youth is very important. And many of the keywords included the word youth, so this might be a pressure for you, the youth group. But what do you think, Kikawa-san? Yes, thank you very much. And I can feel that you have a lot of expectation of us youth, which makes me even more determined that we have to promote our activities further. And so our keyword is approaches from fields other than biodiversity conservation. I already touched upon this briefly before, and based on your views expressed, I would like to explain about this. Of course, and each sector has its own strengths and the things that they do best. Biodiversity varies from one locality to another. So the local approach is very important. And the next J has one project, and I have been personally involved in that. That project it works on the restoration of vegetation and also increasing the species of the mammals. And there are different kinds of working groups working on different issues, and they have set their own targets. And one of them is the community building. And that is a major characteristics. For example, the local citizens participate in the restoration of vegetation, and they use the wood from the plantation forests to create the products that are characteristics to that locality. And this kind of activity also include creating the panels through which to disseminate the information about the biodiversity. And these activities also contribute to building a stronger local community. And we can also aim to link these activities with others, and the roles that the youth can play in these activities is the young people themselves should come up with other kinds of activities through which they can approach and reach out to other young people, like by inviting different people to talk about their activities and their work. And so far, the number of participants is not that many in this kind of activities, but this kind of activity is very important so that we can share our messages with other young people, what's happening internationally and what's happening in other communities. Thank you very much. Since we are running out of time, I would like to ask the CBD Secretariat to Mr. Suzuki to make an intervention. Yes, thank you very much. Yes, as Kikawa-san from the youth group said, as compared to COP26 climate change COP, but the COP 15 has not garnered a lot of attention. Yes, that's right. But the next year's COP will gather a lot more attention, I believe. And as for the youth, in our projects of J-GBF, the youth portion has been most effective, I think. The young people in 2010 at COP10 have now grown up and become adults, and they have grown up, and Gibbon has a really big presence in our activities in J-GBF, and I hope that they are going to make some transformation. And we wanted to do the youth summit in Japan, but it has been postponed. And if some organizations and somewhere, if the venue is provided to us free of charge, then we'll be able to implement it. because we would like to do the youth summit in Japan in the next framework. So I would like to ask for your cooperation. Thank you very much. So from the Ministry of Environment, please try to be brief.
So, Ministry of the Environment, so we'd like to focus on three things going forward. One is the region, and 30 by 30 target will be aimed at, and with the OECM. And the second, in the corporations, mainstreaming of the biodiversity and disclosure, and also the supply chain attention will be increased. And the third one is in order to encourage the individuals to such as a point system to and incentivize the individual activities and awareness for biodiversity. Thank you very much. And it's been with this, I can feel confident enough. Well, in fact, this badge, I've been wearing this for 12 years and it's deteriorated. It is and it's turning brown. So I think I can remove this badge now. And so that doesn't mean that I'll withdraw from this the biodiversity realm, but I would like to assess the concrete actions for the mainstreaming of the biodiversity going forward. And so at the COP10, one young person asked me whether I'll be still alive in 2030. So this type of activities is all about continuation and the succession. So would like to pass over this badge to Takeuchi-san, who will be the leader of the next activities. Thank you very much, Mr. Wakui, and also the panelists. Thank you very much for a very lively discussion. And also, there's been a lot of questions raised by the audience, and we have not been able to answer all your questions, understand, but I appreciate very much all the questions. And so with this, we would like to conclude the second part of this forum, and would like to move on to the closing of this forum. And also from overseas, I understand that you are joining us with the time difference, and thank you very much for joining us out of your very busy schedule. Thank you.
So lastly, in closing this event, I would like to invite Mr. Takeuchi, acting chair of Japan Conference for 2030 Biodiversity Framework, Mr. Takeuchi. Thank you very much for the introduction. This is Takeuchi speaking. So I was appointed the acting chair of Japan Conference for 2030 Biodiversity Framework, J-GBF. So in closing this webinar, I would like to say a few words. First of all, I would like to thank the panelists today for very interesting discussions. And on behalf of the organizers, I'm very pleased and thank you very much. And listening to your remarks. Once again, I realized how significant and useful it was, the mainstreaming activities for biodiversity by UNDP or UNDB-J in the last 10 years or 12 years, in the words of Wakui Sensei. But on the other hand, the Aichi targets were not fully achieved, and we have new challenges before us. And the next GBF for 2030, which is now being discussed earnestly, will include the 30 by 30 objective for 2030 to protect the land and sea areas, 30% of land sea areas by 2030, and also the objective for reducing burden on the biodiversity throughout the supply chain. It's very specific objective. So business sector and other sectors should be working more closely in a coordinated manner. And the next 10 years by 2030 is internationally is a decisive decade. And so the next 10 years are quite decisive. You know, if we cannot make the social transformation towards more sustainable development, then we will face a very dangerous situation. In other words, in the next 10 years, if we can turn the tide, then by 2050, we can realize the world where we can live in harmony with the nature, or the net zero emissions world. As for the youth, I think one important thing is that these are the people, the generation that can see through what it will become in 2030. So these are the generation that will be the main protagonist in the future. And it's very important that this generation will see through until the 2030. And lastly, I would like to thank CBD Secretariat who co-sponsored this event, as well as all the panelists and speakers, and all other people who have made this event possible. And of course, all the participants who have listened to this webinar until the end. Thank you very much. And with that note, I would like to close this meeting. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Takeuchi. So with this, we would like to conclude today's program. And thank you once again for your participation and for all the panelists.